kick this thing off and get going. So, hey, thanks for coming today. I'm very excited about having this panel together. I think it's a topic that a lot of people try to avoid. So, but at the same time, it's one that's very, very important. And I'll tell you, frankly, one of our panelists is the one that kind of made me decide that this is the panel we needed to have. And Rebecca's been writing some really good blogs that have been on Life's Copilot recently on all this getting prepped for and what you need to be thinking about. So I ended up pulling together a really good panel today. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce everybody. So I'm going to just kind of introduce you, and I'll let you kind of tell people who you are, what you do, what your company does, and we'll go from there. So Kate Horgan, where are you? There you are. You just got on. I just say that. That's great. So hi, Kate. Did you hear us?
Technical difficulty, but got it worked out. So
you were on top of my list here, so that's why I didn't think. But anyway, so I'll let you roll out. Tell us who you are and what you do and your company and all that.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. My name's Kate Horgan, and I'm a family advisor at Indiana Funeral Care. Indiana Funeral Care is a full-service funeral home located. We have two locations, one in kind of the northeast side of Indianapolis and one in Greenwood. And our model is a little different in that we will do services anywhere in the state of Indiana. We will come to you is kind of the way we look at it. And we do that by hosting, visitations, viewings in churches, American Legion halls, whatever public building is comfortable for you and your family. So we appreciate being able to do this because it allows us to keep our volume up, but also keep our overhead down. And so our prices have, traditionally been a significantly lower price than other funeral homes. So we're full service as far as any kind of pre-need planning that you need to do. We can do pre-need just planning or pre-need and pre-funding. So we have 4 family advisors available to help you out. I think that's all I'll say as far as an intro, but
okay.
Get into questions later.
Thank you. Sarah, why don't you tell us who you are and what you do?
Thank you. I sure will. My name is Sarah Kendrick, and just within the past year, I have started a business that offers life transition pre-planning. So it's a little bit different than what they do with the funeral homes and estate closure services. So I actually help for people to gather all the essential information that would be needed for a big life event. If you're moving, if you were to lose a wallet, if someone were to pass away, I have all the information gathered in one place for them that they could use to finalize their estate. And then I can also provide administrative supports, helping people make some of those phone calls and take care of some of those details after someone has passed. And I can do it all virtually. So.
Oh, very good. You're kind of a unique niche in this marketplace, and can definitely provide services that way. Jennifer, would you like to tell us who you are and what you guys do? So.
Hi, I'm Jen Groover. I work with several funeral homes around Indiana, but mostly Bustle Family Funerals, O'Reilly, and Carlisle Branson. And we're just very big on the company that I work for. We work with privately owned funeral homes where we talk about pre-planning, veterans benefits, imminent work. We work with hospice. We're really big on educating families and knowing that they have all types of choices and what may fit one family member and it may not fit another. We're really big on pre-planning is really the final gift that you give, that you meet and give with for your family. So many times, we meet people during chaos because no one wants to talk about pre-planning and no one wants to talk about a funeral and it's just not a fun topic. So we just talk about, let's have that talk of a lifetime. Let's get it out on the table because it's so much more comfortable while that person's here and can make choices rather than when you have to make choices for them. So again, we're just really big on having that talk.
Excellent. Scotty.
Yeah, Scotty Fields. I've been in the pre-need industry probably close to 20 years now. I worked for Flanagan Buchanan a lot of years. worked for New Crown Cemetery some years, then worked at Levine's and Summers a few years, and now I'm work with a new firm, Rawls Mortuary, like a year-old funeral home. But I'm still independent, where I do a lot of, if I can't do any pre-needs, I do a lot of final expense policies as well. So just like the ladies were saying, we target the same market as far as helping families, obviously pre-plan, and then obviously the most common thing is funding that pre-need funeral.
Excellent. Rebecca.
I'm Rebecca Geyer. I'm with Rebecca Geyer and Associates, and I'm an estate planning and elder law attorney. So I am assisting families often when a loved one has passed away. We do full service estate administration to help them understand what needs to happen in terms of collecting assets and making sure we can do a smooth transition to the heirs or beneficiaries, depending on what the assets may be. In addition to that, we do lifetime planning as well. So we help families meet and put together plans like wills and trusts, advanced directives, powers of attorney. And from an elder law perspective, we also meet with individuals or families when they have a loved one who may not be able to live independently any longer. And we determine what can be done to keep them independent. We look at different places that might allow them to live comfortably if they can't safely stay in their home. And then we determine how to pay for the cost of care. So we deal with things like Medicaid, Medicare, and veterans benefits, as well as some Social Security issues.
Excellent. Well, there was a question that came in. I'm going to open it up to probably to Jen and Kate both. Does your funeral home support families who want a home funeral?
So I don't know if you want me to go first or Kate to go
I don't
first.
care.
But,
I'm just,
okay.
it's
Kind
in
of
your
depends
guys'
on what.
space.
Okay. It really, we are kind of the same. We try to meet the families where they are. During the pandemic, we have had several families that have had like cremation with memorial services and had them at their home with the funeral director present. And then because we've had to kind of downsize what we can do as far as services because of COVID, we've made it's been really actually a very nice way to do it. They invite their immediate family in and have a memorial service. So we're absolutely open to that if that's kind of like where they're heading, where they want, the direction that they want to go. We try to personalize it exactly to what we can kind of design it around what they want and what their needs are. We've had to be really creative during this last year to meet families where they are, and during this crisis, trying to figure out how to still celebrate that life, because I feel we're really gonna have some maybe problems in the future with people that couldn't be with their loved ones when they passed away or couldn't visit them in the nursing home, and now they're maybe not having a service because of the number of people that can't be there. So I just really feel like, as far as grief goes, we would really love for them to have a service to start that grieving process. Is how we feel about it.
Yeah, and I would agree with Jen that we try to really work with the families to customize the service, so whatever best meets their needs. We've started doing services that can be Zoom to relatives over that couldn't attend because of either COVID or distance. We sit down and really make a strong effort to personalize that. So if their wish is to have the services at their home, we could definitely accommodate that.
Well, very good. I honestly think I don't think I had any idea if people could do that or not. So that's great to hear that you guys are doing that. I would imagine your world has been turned completely upside down this last year, on how to function. What are you seeing as some, fortunately I haven't had to go to a funeral this year. So what are you seeing as the ways that you're handling this to help people through this time with it, being in such a situation, since we're on that topic?
Yeah, we're, we definitely had to reduce capacity for services that were in our facility just because of the need to meet the government guidelines. But we have, there have been opportunities to do things in churches where they had larger capacity levels. One thing we're seeing, which has, has taken off a lot is the just online planning and being able to take care of some of those details without the face-to-face meeting. That has helped a lot of families just because of the fear of, what they might face if they, were to go out in public. And so being able to kind of take care of things either through the phone, online, or as far as the services, find a location that's going to be able to accommodate the family has been a challenge, but I think we've been able to do it. We did do a drive-through visitation once where the family, the deceased and the family were in a tent outside, and their friends and family they drove by and paid their condolences. So that was probably our most unusual during this time, but it worked.
Jennifer, do you
Yeah,
have?
I think people that definitely have to be flexible. We have definitely taken precautions at the funeral home. We do require a mask. We do require by appointment only, so that we don't have people coming in and out of the funeral home all the time. We do have the front doors locked. However, you can come in. We have we have our funeral home staff, but we're just being a little bit more cautious. We don't necessarily allow food right now or drinks, where before, you could have a whole array of stuff. We just have tried to be very accommodating as far as still having services, still having as much as the state will allow, but also protecting our staff, because we can't function if our staff is sick too. So I also think the streaming has made a big difference. We do YouTube, where families can watch on YouTube or Facebook. We also have the online planning. A lot of times in the beginning, a lot of the directors were just calling families and doing arrangements over the phone. We do have some families that are come in and plan everything, but are going to wait till the spring to actually have the services, which we're happy to do. We just want to be accommodating to them. We do, again, really do think it is very important, no matter if it's in your backyard or if it's a 2-day traditional service, that you celebrate that person and that life that's led. We've done a drive-through service too at the cemetery, where people didn't necessarily get out of their cars. They weren't allowed to, but they could see the person and see the family. We've put safeguards, and some families are very particular, where they may want a row of chairs between them and the casket so that people aren't hugging and embracing. We've used red, yellow, and green light stickers. So if you have a red light, we don't want to be hugged. If you have a yellow light, proceed with caution. If you have a green, then I'm a full-on hugger. And it's just so people kind of have a way of knowing where you stand, because everyone is so different in their thoughts and their beliefs of, what they want to do for their services and how they want to go forward with it.
That red light, that's pretty cool. We did something similar to that, but it was not nearly as classy. My mother-in-law fell the day before my brother-in-law's funeral, so she shattered her shoulder like 11 places. So we didn't want anyone hugging her. So we had like big, big like banner signs across: "Do not hug this woman." So I get that part, but that was our solution for that particular one.
Yeah.
We have another question. Tara lives in Kentucky and will need to transport her mother to Pennsylvania. Is there a cost that can be prepaid as part of a Medicare preparation plan, or is there a prepaid plan? This could be Scotty. I guess Scotty, Kate, and Jennifer, this is all part of what you guys do, isn't it?
It is. And that you can do that spin down and add that service in your pre-arrangement. So absolutely you can make that happen.
How would they go about doing? Just setting it up through a spin down, or?
Right. We'll do a spin down, obviously do a contract, and just write it all up, get all the particulars as far as the funeral home's going to do it from the originating state, and then whatever the receiving funeral home's going to be. So we get all that, write it up in a contract, everything in black and white, and it's irrevocable. So it kind of go into the irrevocable funeral trust.
Now, could you prepare for something like this up ahead of time? I think, where you could actually, if something happens and you have to transport or whatever, can there be like a pre-planning package or an insurance policy or anything that covers those kind of things? Or
Yeah,
you can
there
come into-
there can
Oh,
be.
sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
You go.
Um, you can set something up as far as setting some funds aside in order to cover the costs of that transportation. And then, potentially include funds for what the funeral home in Kentucky is going to do, as well as the funeral home in Pennsylvania. I think the challenge would be one funeral home has to hold the policy, and so they would be the one that would be able to kind of lock in those prices. And that's one of the benefits of pre-planning, is that you lock in today's prices with, with what the funeral home provides. But it would be hard to do with, having two funeral homes, but you could set money aside in order to cover the expenses that they're going to incur with the transportation and with a secondary funeral home.
now, Scotty, in
Would
your
you come into
final
the
needs, is that one of the things that could be done in one of those kind of policies? Or
It can, and what she's explaining is, as far as the originating funeral home will lock in their prices, but they'll put in like what's called like a cash advance item. So we'll kind of see what today's cost is, and that part wouldn't be locked in because we don't know what that price is. So you kind of get today's cost and maybe put, like she was saying, set some money aside. So say if it's $1,000, you could put the 1,000, or you could add even more just to kind of hedge inflation, because like I say, we don't know when that would be. But for as the service at the originating funeral home, those prices will be locked in and guaranteed.
excellent, Jennifer, you were going to say.
Well, when you come into the funeral home to pre-plan, we have to put that money into a trust. And the funeral homes that I work for use homesteaders, but there's all different trusts that you can put it into. And what that does, there's several, Indiana has really good trust laws for the consumer. So if you come in to pre-plan, any of the funeral home's services that they provide and any of the merchandise, those prices are guaranteed. So what you pay in 2021 is what you pay in 2081. There's also a group that's called the cash advance items, and those items are things that are not in the funeral home's control. Transportation to another funeral home, death certificates, obituaries, flowers, possibly if it's not included in your package. Those cash advance items go into that trust, and they just grow to keep up with the cost of living, but we can't guarantee those costs because we're not in control of them. So let's say you put in money for transportation and $1,000, and then when you're the person that passes away, you come in to make those arrangements, and now that trust hasn't kept up, and you have $1,000 and it's now $1,200. The family would owe the $200, but that's the cash advance side of the trust portion. So when you write it into a trust, there's several good things. Like Scotty said, it's irrevocable, so it means that it has a zero cash value until you pass away. So when you're spending down, Medicaid it allows this as an expense because it's not an asset. It also guarantees the cost. It's completely transferable. So if you decide you're in Indiana, you can't take the 18,000 times it snowed this year. You want to move to Florida, we can move that trust to Florida and find a funeral home that will accept it. It also, if Chris Branson or Donna Bustle decides they're moving to Florida and they're leaving their funeral home, then that means that your money is not in the funeral home, it's held separately. So it's a really good way to, and really, like, people say, I'm not ready to do this, or I don't want to die, but really the 55 and betters are really the best group, because you're probably still working. You probably are looking forward to planning for your future, and you're going to live a lot longer. So you're guaranteeing that cost rather than waiting until you are ready, and you kind of missed the boat on that.
Well, as we were talking, as you guys were mentioning the buy or spend downs on Medicaid, my immediate thought was I looked right over at Rebecca, because that's getting into her wheelhouse to deal with all this.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, I just got a question that's going to go right to Rebecca. I don't know if you can, how easy this was going to be to answer, but here's the question. Is there an average cost for working with an Eldercare attorney? Mom has less than $26K of assets in an annuity and not other assets. So I'm going to turn this one over to Miss Rebecca. So.
It's hard for me to say what an average cost is. We're here in Indiana. I don't know if the person asking the question is here in Indiana as well or is elsewhere, and those costs can certainly vary by state. I would tell you most attorneys will charge an initial consultation fee to discuss the matter and determine what needs to be done. Certainly, it would depend on what you're contacting an elder law attorney for. Is it something where you need to get your mother qualified for Medicaid, or do you need help with the state planning documents? So for example, a consultation fee for elder law matters in our office is $300, but if there's additional work that we need to perform, we put that towards the additional work so that you're not paying for both the consultation and the additional work to be performed. If you're going to seek counsel from an elder law attorney, when you call to make an appointment, I would just ask those questions up front, because the price of the services is going to vary depending on what your loved one needs. So you just want to make sure you understand and are clear up front when you make the appointment what it is you need assistance with. And typically the office will be able to give you some ballpark range of what you can anticipate costs to be. With regard to an annuity, if you were contacting an elder law attorney so that they could assist with Medicaid planning, that may be something that eventually has to be surrendered, but that is something that the elder law attorney could discuss with you during a consultation.
Very good. Well, now we've been talking about, pretty much like the things that are happening at the moment or what have you. But let me ask you, I will tell you, our family has really sucked at this, okay, for forever. Basically, our model is we wait until it's time, and then we have to go running and find a funeral home and buy everything and buy everything. So, and it's highly stressful that way, I will tell you, because we've done it a lot, so it is a very stressful moment. I understand that there are people who pre-plan, okay, who actually get in front of this, or families that do. Maybe eventually our family will catch on, but so the question is, I want to start with you, Rebecca. You have written some really good, like I said, some really good blogs over the last couple months on basically putting some things together. So I'm going to let you kind of start off with kind of getting in front of things.
Sure. And I'm sure Sarah can talk a little bit about this as well, because she's helping families gather that information. But I think one of the biggest gifts that you can give your family does not cost, an attorney in order to put this together, is making sure that you're organized about the sources of income that you have, the assets that you have that would need to be collected if something happens to you. Too often, even though we all know that death is a reality, we tend to think we have time, we'll get around to it. And unfortunately, a lot of what I see is done in a crisis or done because someone has died unexpectedly. And if you're not around, your loved ones cannot ask you for information they need in order to access your accounts. And so there's a lot of concern these days about accessing things that might just be digital assets. Almost everyone these days has an email account, or perhaps they have an online account for a financial asset. They may have airline miles related to a credit card. There's all sorts of things. And if you don't keep track of the different assets for your loved ones to know about, then it's going to be difficult for them to determine what they need to do at the time of your death. And one of the most difficult things about administering an estate is that it's not clear cut. Not every single asset is collected the same way. Some things pass by beneficiary designation and require a claim form. Sometimes things require a court order in order to access them. It's kind of all over the place. So the more you can be organized in providing a list of advisors to your family members, a list of the sources of income you might receive, whether they're direct deposited or they come by check, so we know what might need to be stopped, information about your health insurance, information about the types of assets, account numbers, that's going to be really helpful. And I would add that I don't think it's necessary for people to write down the exact dollar amount in each of their accounts. Lots of people are very private about their finances, and that's okay. It's still helpful just to have the account number and the name of the financial institution and a phone number or a trusted contact to reach out to about the account, so that in the event something happens, either an incapacity or a death, someone knows whom to contact and can reach out if in the event of a death to determine what needs to be done in order to collect that asset.
Excellent. Well, Sarah, let's go bring you in on this. I know that you're this superhero that comes in after the things and basically tries to put everything right for people when they're in chaos. Do you ever get to come in beforehand and help them get prepared for it, or does anybody think ahead, or how does that work?
Yes, they do sometimes. And that's what I'm trying to kind of build. Originally, my plan was to provide some of that support after someone has passed. But in helping my own family work through that process, I realized how much of a benefit it would be to have all of that information gathered ahead of time. So you can kind of consider it to be, my husband used this analogy tonight, a Rolodex of all the information that you would need, as Rebecca was saying, those financial accounts, your social media accounts. There's, have you considered, would your spouse know what bills need to be paid? Or if you don't have a spouse or you live alone, would anybody know what bills need to be paid? Where would they find those accounts? Who would be those contact people who would help take care of those things? And I help do that. Yeah, I've actually developed, like I said, kind of a digital Rolodex, if you will. It's a book that I go through with people. I provide that one-on-one support because I think a lot of people mean really well, but they kind of fall through on the actual execution of things. They might buy a book even, but it doesn't necessarily always get filled out. But I work with people either as a couple or one-on-one, and I go through that whole process with them so that everything is filled out and it's available to whoever they want to share it with. It's on a digital flash drive, so it's something that's very easily transportable if it were, if there was an emergency and they had to just grab it and go. But yeah, it can make such a difference for your family if they already know where to go to look for that information, because otherwise, they're having to sort through paperwork and is this still current? You might have files from years ago. I was actually just working with someone and she was talking to a friend of hers who's organizing her information, and she's only 30, so on the younger end of the spectrum, but she had utility bills from 2014. And that's just, if you consider what that compounds to, if you are more than 30, it could be quite a lot of information to sort through. So yeah, I help to kind of narrow it down. Some people do plan ahead, and I think that more people ought to. It's a great way to leave a legacy of peace with your family because your wishes are very clear. They know what to do. They know where to go to find the information.
Just even the passwords, I can
Yep.
see that being a real challenge with people. So,
Yeah.
Well, it is. And a lot of online services, they don't have to necessarily work with you. Some of the laws are changing on what they have to provide or how they have to work with families. But if you can imagine not being able to access somebody's email or Facebook because you don't have a death certificate yet, or just because there's some sort of holdup, it's just one more level of frustration or problem that doesn't need to be there. So
very good.
We'll say, Jim, here in Indiana, we do have language that you can put in both powers of attorney, trusts, and in wills to give an agent or a trustee or a personal representative the ability to access digital assets, but that's not true in all 50 states. It's becoming much more of a pressing issue to collect those assets because people die and you don't have usernames or passwords. And Sarah's right, the more you can give that information in advance, the more helpful it will be. But if you don't, you should make sure your estate planning documents give your agents the ability to contact those companies and request that access information for your digital assets at a minimum.
One thing that I was, this is in getting prepared for things, whatever those things are, is those POAs, is those different opportunities. I had a panic moment in my own family. I had an uncle who all of a sudden ran into some situations, and a hospitalization was not really where he was able to answer for himself on some of these things. And I was it for him, but I wasn't next in line. I mean, it was, so all of a sudden, if something would have basically happened, I'd have had no say, and so, fortunately we were able to go back and get all these things done. But, if you want to expand on that, people don't maybe not realize even how their spouse, it's amazing how little power a lot of people really have that they don't know.
Well, and one thing we should mention is the funeral planning declaration, which is a good thing for people to consider. Should they not have immediate family or estranged from their immediate family, it gives them the power to essentially declare who they want to take care of their arrangements and what arrangements that they want. And so that's it's an easy step that we can take when someone is planning their funeral or their arrangements, that we can get that set up so that there isn't a I guess a challenge between two different people, or it's very clear as to who would be in charge of the decisions that would be made for the funeral services.
Kate raises a really good point. And in the absence of a funeral planning declaration, the person who has the authority to make and carry out funeral wishes is actually the healthcare representative. It's not the executor under the will in Indiana. And that's a common misconception among heirs, I find.
Interesting. So it like a POA for healthcare, or what is it as far? Okay.
Mhm.
Interesting. So now, okay, so let me say this. Let's say somebody decides they're watching this video either now or down the road on the in the archives, and they're going, we probably ought to do something like this. Okay. So they're like, okay, I'm convinced that I probably ought to look into it. I could start with any of you. Sarah, what would be the first step what somebody would want to do if they were going to either DIY what you do or meet with you to figure out what to do?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I actually offer reaservices.com. RHEA is my website, and you can actually go on there and buy a copy of the book if you are an organized person who's really good at following through on projects and you want to take that on yourself. Absolutely. There are also other resources. You can find them online, Amazon, or your local bookstores probably. But I just think it's really important for people to do that work. So if you can do it on your own, certainly go do. If you did find that you wanted some help, some of that accountability, that's something that I can schedule with people. It's 3 sessions. It usually takes about 3.5 hours, and then it's done on my end of things. And so we talk about, we don't go into the detail of the funeral plans quite as much, but you can say some of that, what you want to say, and those accounts, your financials, what you would want done with your pets, your beneficiaries. So you can contact me to set up an initial consultation if you want to talk about it first. But otherwise, yeah, we can just go ahead and get started with that process.
Well, this was basically for all 3 of you over here. So for Kate and Jennifer and Scotty, this pre-planning concept, okay, I know that a lot of people do it, but a lot of people have probably not looked into it or what it is. What does that feel like? What's the process? What if they call you and they're wanting to do it? How would you walk them? What's the experience going to be like from the time they make that phone call to where you're getting them up to speed and set up? I'll let you guys handle that. Whoever wants to start.
Well, I'll start from the initial call. You gather all information, and the main thing you want to get a face-to-face. Now it's kind of tough, but just the ideal appointment is to get a face-to-face, sit down with the person or persons, get all their vital information. That's kind of how I start, because we have planning guides, funeral planning guides. A lot of what Sarah was talking about. We have funeral planning guides that we kind of just go through and itemize everything they want to get all the vital information and then move to obviously what type of service they want. Do they want a funeral or cremation? And then go through all those particulars. Then we go to the cemetery portion of it. See which cemetery, if they're going with a traditional burial, find out what cemetery that they want and all the items that go with that. And then just kind of write out a funeral cost estimate. So it just show them everything that they select as far as the funeral, the cemetery, the vault. And then we get into the cash advance, those non-guarantee items, flowers, clergy, honorarium. So you kind of walk through everything with the form. We just kind of go line by line as to what they want. Then you get obviously to the bottom line where that sticker price come in, and it's a shocker, but it's a reality that families need to know to see exactly what they wanted. And then that's when we're going to the different funeral trusts, as far as they can pay for it, and obviously a single pay, 3-year, 5-year, or up to 10 years, depending on the age. So that's the idea. And then if they're not ready at that particular time, at least they have, obviously I always call it a roadmap as to what they would want their family to kind of satisfy at the end of their life.
Mhm. And I would agree with Scotty that we do, we do um, a similar program as far as sitting down and meeting with the family if that's possible, um, and capture information that we need for the death certificate, as well as what their wishes are in terms of types of funeral services and any merchandise or any specifics in terms of flowers, songs, music, things like that. Just to again get back to that customization and celebrating their life. um, I would encourage people to at least get 2 estimates, and if that's an option, depending on where they are. Sometimes there's just one funeral home in their town, and so that's kind of the go-to place. But if you have the option to get more than 1 estimate, funeral costs can vary dramatically, and it's worth your while to look into that. We actually publish everything on our prices are on our website. So it's indianafuneralcare.com. And, people can go there and maybe do a little homework in advance and just try to get a rough idea how much things are going to cost. But yes, there can be sticker shock, as Scotty said. And so, but that's the nice thing about planning in advance, is that you can make payments over a period of time. And it isn't some lump sum that to do at a time when everybody is grieving and dealing with a lot of emotions. To add a several $1,000 bill on top of it is really difficult. So getting that taken care of in advance really helps families when the actual death occurs.
Jennifer, do you have anything on
Yeah,
that?
I
or-
would agree with that too. I think a lot of it, I would agree with Kate that you just really need to educate yourself. And you just want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples when you go into the different funeral homes. The other thing is we talk about veterans benefits. A lot of times families don't have any idea that they even have veterans benefits with an honorable discharge. Veteran and spouse can be buried at national cemeteries. Indiana, we typically use Marion and Madison, but that is the vault, the plot, the vault, the plot, the headstone, and the opening and closing for a veteran and spouse at no cost. In the Indianapolis market, that could be a $12,000 to $15,000 savings, and so many veterans have no idea that that's even available. We also talk about there is a really big difference between traditional services and cremation, so it's really important to have that talk with your families. Sometimes kids are amazed that their parents want cremation and they never would have guessed that. We invite family members to come in with their parents while they're pre-planning, because a lot of times they'll say, well, I kind of want to run this past my kids. So we'll say, well, bring your kids in so that they can kind of be a part of this and know what's going on. It is family dynamics are much different. I'm sure that family dynamics have been crazy for a long time, but sometimes you have maybe 4 kids and 2 can help pay for funeral costs and 2 can't. So whatever you do ahead of time as far as funding, it really truly is a gift for your family. You typically tend to emotionally overspend if you're waiting until that day. Your heart is not that you wouldn't want the best for your parents, but sometimes you overspend because you're so emotional about it. So pre-planning kind of gives you rational, clear thoughts about what you're doing ahead of time, rather than doing it in the height of grief and emotion. So just whatever you do, it is a gift. And whether you fund it or not fund it, whether you do a partial funding, we can work all kinds of creative ways to make it fit your budget, because we don't want you to start something you can't finish, because then you're still back in the same ball game if something happens.
Very good. Well, Scotty, you brought up, and I imagine that the other two, you guys do it as well, but like final needs insurance I know Scotty does that. Do you guys do it as well, or?
We typically do homesteaders trust, which is just a little bit different, because the final expense doesn't necessarily, at least on our end, lock in the funeral home costs. Mm-hmm. So when you come in and pre-plan with the homesteaders trust, it's going to guarantee those prices.
Okay.
Where with final expense, a lot of times you have a lump sum.
How does the final expense insurance work, and what is that going to do for people?
The final expenses, it's obviously when I'm sitting with someone pre-planning and show them the difference in price, I just tell them the final expense is just a bucket of funds that's available once the death occurs, versus you going and doing the pre-need is locking in those prices. So price-wise, a pre-need on a monthly basis may be a little higher versus you might get a little more death benefit on the final expense. But in essence, too, I add too, far as once the difference in pre-plan and then at need, and I always tell my families, at need, the only thing that's optional that you don't have to get at that time of death is a headstone. Everything else has to be paid 72 hours ahead of time. Versus once you pre-plan, and although you see the sticker shock number, you don't have, I always tell my families, you don't have to do everything at once. You can do a piece at a time. I have some families where pre-plan the casket only. Get the casket paid for it, and then maybe move to the funeral service, or vice versa. I don't do cash advances, pay those off, then move to the casket. So that's the beauty of pre-planning, where you could do a section at a time versus doing everything at once if you don't have the ability to do it or even want to do it. You got the ability, but not want to exhaust all your funds at once. So that's another beauty to pre-planning.
But that's great information. Go ahead.
We sell pre-need insurance trusts as well, so we don't do anything with final expenses. So Scotty, you might be able to answer this. You know, with the pre-need plans, there's a finite number of payments, so to speak. So if you set it up for a payment term that would be 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, I'm not sure if the final expense, is there a limited term on that you pay into it, or do you continue to make those monthly payments?
And that's a good question. And I always explain that as well, as far as I tell them they have a stop pay where they can control how many years they want to pay it if they do the pre-need versus the whole life final expense. And I tell them what to say, it's a whole life. So it's indefinite. Whereas although your price may be lower, you get more death benefit, but your premium is going to go forever till you pass, versus you could control it a 1 year, 3 year, 10 years, and then it's done.
Excellent. This is, totally unscientific. It's my own funerals that we've dealt with in my family over the years, but nothing's been real current, thank God. But is 10,000 a number you need to be kind of thinking plus or minus, or what's the 10 to 12? Is that still in that same range, or?
10 is a good number. I try to get my families at least, if we're going to do a whole life policy, at least 15,000. 10 to get you done, depending on what, depending on what funeral home, once you get those different quotes. Some funeral homes may be a little lesser price wise than others. So you might could get it done package wise, because a lot of funeral homes now are packaging items to kind of save some money that way. So with that, 10,000 may get you a funeral, and then depending on what cemetery, so that's going to be another driving factor. So I would say right now, 15,000 is the number. 10,000 you could get it done, depending on what cemetery you're going to use.
Well, I mean, I know you can go 100,000 or whatever, but it's like, but I just was trying to figure out when people have some kind of a, what they're facing, so that there is a reason to start planning for this ahead of time, as opposed to getting slapped in the face with that kind of a bill, so.
Absolutely.
Right. And a big consideration is whether it's cremation or casket burial, just because your cemetery expenses will probably be, at least in our situation with our funeral home, the cemetery expenses are pretty much equal to the funeral home side of the expenses. So you're going to, be in that $10,000 range easily with a casket burial. Yeah. Excellent.
Now, Rebecca, if someone is coming into this and they're trying to do a pre-plan or a prepaid or whatever, the process, could they be, and let's say that they are wanting to work with you to protect assets or what have you, would that money then be something that they could be using as a potential spend down on a Medicaid, or how does that work?
Yes, I mean, if someone is coming to me, one of the first initial questions we're asking when we're talking about qualifying someone for Medicaid is, have they already pre-planned their funeral? And if they have not, that's always something we want to make sure that gets taken care of before any funds are spent on any other purposes. And that's because all 50 states under federal Medicaid law provide that money can be spent on a prepaid funeral and still allow an individual to qualify for Medicaid. The actual prepaid funeral planning is not considered to be an asset, as was discussed earlier. The only thing to be aware of with regard to funeral planning and Medicaid that I haven't heard talked about is that if someone does a prepaid funeral trust and the costs of the goods and services at the time that the loved one passes away are less than what was put in the trust, Indiana, for example, will require an excess funds clause for Medicaid, which indicates that the funeral home will provide any excess funds that were not spent on the funeral to the state of Indiana to reimburse the state for any amounts it paid for the individual under its Medicaid program.
Right. And that's the
Right.
same too as if someone would assign their life insurance policy and make the funeral home beneficiary and the owner of the policy to take that asset out of the name. So let's say they had a $10,000 policy and their services were $8,000. That $2,000 were required to send back to Medicaid.
Yeah.
Or to state. Yeah.
Very interesting. So what do you recommend to someone that's out there trying to think, what would be the first step that they should possibly be doing? And I don't care who starts with this. I don't know if it's, Sarah saying, here, buy my book, or if it's, or if it's, come on in and see me type thing. So what is that first step? Because I'm going to guarantee you that people are scared to death to go talk to you guys. Because
Well, I think there was a survey done that it's like, they did a survey and maybe a couple of years ago, and it said, how important do you think pre-planning is? And it was like 85% of the people said it's very important. Well, how many people have done it? And it was like 15%. Because I think that it is that stigma that if I go plan for something, then it's going to happen. Or like if I talk about it, it's going to happen. Or it's just uncomfortable. Or there's families that'll say, I'm just going to leave it up to my kids. Well, your kids really, I know they don't want to talk about it, but they really don't want you to leave it up to them. I think that, there's just a negative connotation that goes with it, but it's just proactive planning. In life, we plan for so many things. So we pay for flood insurance and car insurance and house insurance and things that we may not even use, but I can guarantee you're going to use this at some point. There's no getting out of it. So it's just being proactive in your planning and being smart and educated about moving forward to it. People, like when we're pre-planning, we laugh and crack up. It's not a doom and gloom. People like to meet with me. It's when you're meeting with the other people that it's not so fun. So it can be an easy, light experience. It doesn't have to be doom and gloom. And nobody has ever come back to me and said, gosh, I wish I would not have done this. And I can tell you how many people have said, I'm so grateful that my parents did this, or my sister did this, or my brother did this, or I had no idea that they did this.
Yeah,
I did early on when I first started doing these panels. At that time, I wouldn't have two people in the same space on it, so we didn't cover a topic. We covered generalities, so that people can kind of get to see the whole thing. I love these where we focus on a topic, but we had a guy that he was with a funeral home and cemetery, and he was selling the pre-plans and what have you. And he's a big boisterous guy. Okay, he moved to out of state, so he's not part of our market anymore. But he's a big boisterous guy, and I could watch the people turned off by his mortician sense of humor. Okay, because he was just that. And I've got several friends that are morticians, and they have a weird sense of humor. The ones I've run into, but I think it is a job requirement. But anyway. And I could watch people kind of recoil at his sense of humor, but then later on, he told his story, why he got into that field. And it was really, it was fascinating to watch. He was talking about, it was a 4th of July weekend. He and his family were, he was already 2 drinks into the weekend. He was having a great time, and everybody's all ready to go. And he gets a phone call that he had to go to the hospital immediately because his mom was taken to the hospital, and she was like only in her 50s. And she passed before he got there. So all of a sudden he goes into this, now I'm going from party mode to I have to deal with all this stuff, and nothing was ready and nothing was prepared, and then all the crisis that goes with that. And he goes, just the emotion that he shared of what he dealt with and his family dealt with over that weekend years before opened the door to, I think. And what was really amazing, we had about 20 people in the room that were, that's back when we could do things live and in person. But I think of the all the panelists, he's the one that got the most, handed out the most stuff, because everyone was like, oh my God, this is why we have to do it. But that's it, isn't it? I mean, isn't it? It's really basically there to protect that family at their most fragile moment.
Definitely. It's, we've said it before, but the greatest gift you can give to your family. And it's, you'll never, if you've ever had to sit through those planning sessions, it's heartbreaking, the struggle people experience, and to be able to alleviate that, as well as give them more time to grieve and share stories and laugh and really talk about the memories that they have of their loved one. It's a much healthier way to move forward and move on. So we would encourage everyone.
Well, I just know from personal experience is when you're dealing with it at the moment, it is you're grabbing brass rings trying to survive, and making decisions that you're not really sure they're the best ones to do. We have a question that popped up. Are there ways people can save money on funeral costs? And then the second question is, are there green or eco-friendly options in Indiana? So I'll leave that to you experts. So.
Well, as far as saving money on funeral costs, you can certainly, planning ahead will save you money. Case in point, my mother-in-law passed away in August of 2019. She had set up her plan in 2006, I believe, and paid $6,000 for a full traditional 2-day ceremony. If we had done the same, we had to pay for it in August of 2019, it would have been, instead of $6,000, it would have been $14,000. So the savings just to avoid the inflation is very significant. So, there's that. There are options. Some people really want to have a viewing, and that, there are some studies that show that it does provide the closure that family members need to really have that chance to say goodbye. A lot of people are going towards a traditional viewing visitation, but then a cremation to follow. So you save money on potentially the cemetery expenses, or just not having the casket. We use a rental casket in those situations. So there are there are definitely a lot of options, and it kind of depends on if you're wanting the casketed burial type versus the cremation. But as I said before, cremation typically is less expensive than having a casket and a burial, just because of the additional cemetery expenses involved. And if somebody wants to talk about the eco-friendly, they can, or I can keep going, but I don't want to hog the show.
I know we do have an eco-friendly at Washington Park North Cemetery, and like I said, I used to work out there. That's why I know that. But I'm gonna piggyback on as far as just answering the question about saving money. I always tell family, of course, you would save money because you're doing it yourself. And I had the privilege of working pre-need and at-need, both at the cemeteries and funeral homes. One thing about at-need, once death occurs, I never seen one person come in. It's always says like peer pressure. So if it wasn't a pre-need in place, you sit at the table, it's 3 to 4 to 5, 6 people, and their mom just passed. Obviously, they want their mom to look the best. They want the best for their mom. So the mom would have pre-planned herself. She would have kept the price here. But now you have peer pressure in the room. The price is going to go there. So you definitely will save money pre-planning, obviously, because you're gonna do it the way you want to do it and lock those prices in today's prices.
Good idea. Jennifer, you were going to say something, I think.
There's just all different levels of, just to say what, like Scotty said, is when, when you pre-plan, you're kind of more modest in your selections. And when you don't pre-plan and your family comes in, they're not so modest in selections. So it takes out the guesswork when you pre-plan and you've chosen this. And so your family's okay with it because you've chosen it. Even if you haven't prepaid, but come in and pre-plan, sometimes people are like, I don't want to prepay, but I want to get all my wants and wishes on paper, which is half the work. So that's okay too. And just to talk about cremation a little bit, cremation, of course, is there's so many different options, but we always tell people just kind of have a plan for what you're going to do with your ashes once you've passed away, what their final disposition is, because just in this last year, we have had several calls from Goodwill because your ashes, like if my husband passed away, his ashes would be so important to me, and they would probably be really important to my kids, but my kids, it's going to kind of freak them out a little bit. So we've just found, people have found ashes in attics. People have found they don't know what to do with them. We've had to track back several Goodwill calls because there was someone found an urn in their attic. So it just the final disposition, whether it's going to be buried, scattered, whether, just kind of have a plan for that. We do think that's important.
Good point. Scotty touched on the green. I think that Kate, you were talking about something on green too,
Yeah.
or
There are several options. Probably 15 years ago, 20 years ago, having a green burial was a really popular idea. And Scotty, you might be able to talk about this more, but my understanding when there's a green burial is that you actually end up buying 2 cemetery plots because you have to have that extra space because you aren't going to have the casket in the vault to kind of hold the body and everything. So you end up spending a lot more if you want to have a green burial. And so that's kind of not as popular as it was maybe 15, 20 years ago. The other side, as far as cremation, there are a lot of biodegradable type of urns. So if people decide that they want to be cremated and then bury the remains somewhere, they can choose a vessel that will sort of, as over time, disintegrate. So there's that option.
Well, guys, it's always amazing to me that these things always, all of a sudden I see an hour has come and gone, but because I think we could always continue to go. I really enjoyed the questions we had today. Those were outstanding. I want to do a real quick screen share to show everyone what's coming up. So we have, not sure yet, there we go. So basically on Life's Co-Pilot, we have these events on a regular basis. And so the next upcoming events that we have, let's see if I can get it open. There's one that is going on that is one of our members is running. It's called Daughterhood Circle, and you can go into there. Jesse and Jean and Regina Smith are participating in this, but that's a great place for you to go and learn about what they're up to. And then we have one coming up with today's new and improved Medicare medical options. I don't have the names on here yet because I have one more I'm trying to get on the panel, so before I promote it. But it's different places, like in-home doctors is for different such things like that. Another one coming up is going to be on Medicare. So we always try to provide these panels so that we can get you guys out there and educate people on these needs. Does anybody have anything else you're wanting to say? So I'll give you across the board here. We can all say your final words if you have to. Anybody?
I think the most important thing is just to get started. Start having those conversations with your family. Start making some of those phone calls to some of the experts or whoever you think you might need to speak with. Just don't be afraid of that. I think that we're all very friendly and eager to help because we've seen what families go through when those plans don't happen, and it's really hard. It's much better to leave that legacy of peace and kind of put that forward that you thought about it and this is what you'd like to see.
I agree. It's good point, Sarah.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are, if people will do this, they're basically allowing their family to grieve rather than, trying to figure out all the business decisions that have to be made in the process while they're under massive stress. So, well, thank you so much for all of you for being here. I think it was oh wait, I got one more question. Let's see what it is here real quick. Are these events on the Facebook page? What is the name of your Facebook page? The Facebook page is Life's Co-Pilot. Life's Co-Pilot is just the name of the Facebook page. These events do get promoted on it. It doesn't have all of them lined up like they do on the website. The website's just lifescopilot.com. And then you've got all kinds of resources there. You've got under resources, there's blogs. Many of you have written those blogs, like I was just saying. Rebecca's been really good at putting good ones in there. We've got blogs in there from the experts. We've got these videos that we store on there under a video library. We have a glossary of terms. So when you happen to talk to somebody in the industry, we use acronyms. You can find out what that means. And then we have what the upcoming events are and more. So please take a look at that. Tara, thank you so much for asking. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for for being here, and we'll have another one here in a couple of weeks. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Thanks so
Jim.
much.
Yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me.